Hello, Dr. Toby Watson. You're joining me on the Capital Show. It was nice to see you at Trump National Westchester in New York. It was a great gathering. You are a psychological political analyst. So I'm so glad to have you. And I saw you in the inauguration as well a few months ago. We're gonna talk about many things, especially your involvement. First, we're gonna start about your involvement with Turning Point USA. You are close to Charlie Kirk's movement. How do you see the intersection of conservative values and mental health policy involving especially regarding many topics, parental rights, youth druggings, and gender ideology?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it was great to see you as well. And thanks for having me on to talk a little bit about this. And to answer the question, I mean, there's lots of different parts to that question. But I think when you're talking about conservative values and you're talking about mental health care, compared to, I guess, in contrast to people who are more liberal minded or the Democratic Party, there really is kind of a split between the two. Conservative values and people that take that stance tend to view like mental quote unquote illness or suffering in some way, often as having a more psychological cause or ideology. And so they'll often look to things that would be, hey, is there, family, spirituality, the church? Is there a social skill set deficit? And they're looking at doing more psychological intervention. So they're going to be looking at making like a therapist or maybe a rabbi or some sort of, guru of some sort or a minister or priest. They're going to maybe go to somebody who does cognitive behavioral work and somebody who's going to really focus on the individual and the injury to their humanity. Because again, when you have an injury to your humanity, the only thing that restores humanity is humanity, right? So things like love, empathy, compassion, play, laughter, maybe artistic expression like dance and clay and music and all those things that define us as uniquely special as a human, as a soul of God, if you will.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the people that are more in the liberal mindset, not all, but some, maybe they're more agnostic or maybe they are atheists. And so they don't really have that sense of soul and identity where that's integrated. So when they view things, often they buy into that biological model of mental illness or mental suffering.
Yeah.
So they're looking at it as, oh, it's a chemical imbalance. Oh, I've got to go see a doctor. And if you go see a doctor, and I mean like a medical doctor, don't be surprised if you get placed on a medication. I mean, that's the tool that they have to use. It's like going to a hammer and then being surprised when it hits you over the head like a nail.
Yeah.
It's a hammer. That's what it's going to do. It's going to hit you over the head. And maybe there's something that you need that's a little bit more finesse. Maybe there's a screw loose and you need a screwdriver, And so
let me ask
when you see a psychologist, they're looking at it as a holistic, it could include medication. It could be something, spiritual. It could be many, many factors. It could be metabolic. And so I think there's a big divide, between a liberal-minded person and a conservative-minded person and how they view mental health to some extent, especially when we start talking about things like, gender dysphoria, what used to be called gender identity disorder. I used to do quite a bit of that work when I was chief psychologist, within the Department of Corrections here in the state of Wisconsin, ran one of the prisons and was a training coordinator, and then obviously did a lot of that work with our inmates. Again, we had inmates, there was about 31 of them in our system, and I think 29 of them were sex offenders.
Wow.
And if we're saying that gender dysphoria or, the trans group, if we're saying it's just a biological thing, just like, hey, diabetes or just like any other medical disorder, then you should see a sprinkling even within the prison system, meaning that, hey, if I have somebody who's got diabetes or somebody who's got some other sort of metabolic or some sort of other true medical condition, I'm going to see some people there for a drunk driving. I'm going to see some there for theft. I'm going to see some for, domestic violence and all the little things that you see in prison. But that's not what we saw. What we see is that they're almost 100% all sex offenders. And so I think that we, of a conservative mind, view gender dysphoria, gender identity disorder, or again, the trans group as people who ultimately have a
Mm.
identity disorder.
Yeah.
I won't call it an illness because I don't want to be metaphoric, but I would call it a
But
disorder of
this is
identity.
sick. This is sick. How the pharma, big pharma or the pharmaceutical industry use this kind of sick-minded mind like LGBTQ plus to promote or to talk about or to push medications you talked about gender dysphoria. So that works during the Biden administration, and what is the feedback now during Trump? What they are doing about it?
Yeah, well, it's much different, politically now, because obviously under the Biden administration, they saw this as, hey, we just need to indulge this, meaning that, hey, there's nothing wrong. There's no pathology here.
Mm,
People can just be whatever they want to be, and we should accept that.
mm.
Except we shouldn't. I mean, if I have a woman come into my office, a patient who weighs 90 pounds, and she has an identity disorder and says, hey, I think I'm fat, and I feel like I'm a 400-pound woman. Well, what am I going to do with that? I'm not going to sit and tell her, yeah, you're right. You should definitely stop eating. You definitely need to, stop that. And you should, maybe go get some sort of intervention to lose weight. Well, that would be indulging. Well, then why would I do it when a patient comes in and says, I think I'm a girl and I feel like a girl inside, therefore I'm a girl. Am I going to indulge that and say, okay, sure, yeah, you're a girl and treat her like a girl? No, you're a boy. You're a male. You have male genitalia. You have every test that I can run, and every ounce of your being is a male. Now you may identify
So
as a girl.
the medical system was abused, yeah?
The medical system was greatly abused, but they're the ones that jump at it. I mean, the psychiatrists are happy to have extra patients, happy to, prescribe extra hormones and profit from that. And don't be surprised if the hospitals are jumping at it. It's a huge payday for them. I'm a bit surprised that the insurance companies, are willing to do anything.
Yeah.
And,
They are
again, everybody's
exposed.
worried about lawsuits. That's why the prison system, was so weak in the knees. I mean, we have psychiatrists that ran the prison system and they didn't want to go to court over it. They want to be sued for, malpractice. Because again, all you need is a few other doctors to say, well, I would give them hormones. I would, cut off their penis or their breasts. Well, okay. So who's got the standard of care? And the whole idea that gender affirming care, I mean, even that phrase, it sounds like it's care. It's not, it's mutilation, it's abuse.
It's abuse. Many Republicans, especially the Trump administration, is advocating for freedom from government overreach, including healthcare and health. Uh, yeah. How do you think this can be? How the psychiatric drug reform fit into this political and ethical conversation?
Well, thank God we have President Trump in office right now. President Trump has pretty much, changed the narrative in the conversation completely and unilaterally, I might say, because again, change happens from the top down.
Mm.
I mean, that's what happens. You can have certain power below, but it's very difficult to work that power, upwards. And so President Trump has done an amazing job at being able to change the narrative, along with, myself and a lot of other people, giving the research and support, saying, absolutely, you need to take the stance on it because, these predators, and that's what I would call them, these doctors and these hospitals, and really these people with pink and blue hair that really are suffering themselves, they're predators on young children, and they're trying to indoctrinate them into this mindset and sexualize them at ages that there should be absolutely no sexualization. So thank God that the president is, looking at executive orders and looking at, really making it a law to say, and trying to pass this as a law, I should say, trying to let them know that if you perform these type of surgeries on children, and heaven forbid, you think that you have the right to start, as a school or a hospital, not tell a parent who's got the legal responsibility to care and take care of that child, and somehow you're going to interfere with that, well, then you're going to be held accountable, and you should absolutely go to jail for that without question.
Yeah, Moms for Liberty and Moms for America, they are doing great job to spread awareness in this thing. I recall you talked about the danger of ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. So people know little about it. Can you tell us, is still remain a legal and a legal practice, or it has to be removed, or
Yeah. Sure, I can give you a little feedback on ECT. So, electroconvulsive therapy, or shock therapy, often referred to, was something that they started way back in the day, and then during the 60s, 70s, it was very common. In fact, they had shock doctors that would literally pull up in a van outside of a hospital, open the door, and they'd wheel the patients out who, often were quote unquote mentally ill or have some sort of severe disorder going on, and they'd be heavily medicated, and they would lay them down in the van and perform these types of things, as well as lobotomies and things. Actually, I was thinking more lobotomy than the ECT. So a few people like Peter Breggin, Thomas Saz, and others really advocated that this was inhumane, that you're holding somebody down, you're strapping them in, and you're putting electrodes on their head. And then ultimately, you're administering the volts and the shock to them, putting them to a seizure. And then ultimately, then patients would report, afterwards and weeks afterwards that, hey, I don't hear the voices, or gee, I'm not sad anymore. Well, you can imagine if you were a patient in a locked psychiatric ward, I don't think I would tell them that I'm sad or hearing voices either if all of a sudden you started administering massive shocks to me to the point of having a seizure, a grand mal seizure. Well, that's just conditioning, but they called it treatment. Now, if you think about what's actually happening in the brain, you've got, neurons, and you're jolting electricity through that to the point of literally severing those neurons. So you can imagine one of the biggest side effects to ECT, and this is the most profound effect above any sort of therapeutic effect, is loss of memory. So you're going to lose memory. It could be about where you lived. It could be a year of your life. It could be procedural memory, like how to turn on a computer. Or if you're an architect and you don't remember how to, drive a car,
work? Yeah.
your computer.
And
So it really almost got squashed. Nobody was doing it in the country. It was completely almost gone. And all of a sudden, it made a comeback. Over the last 15 plus years, hospitals all over the country now are doing it. And we're talking mainstream hospitals
who is
because it's
behind this
very
comeback?
profitable. What's that?
Who is behind this comeback?
Well, I mean, the device manufacturers, for sure, the device people who make these devices that are going to do it. Mind you, there's never been a clinical trial ever on one of these devices. They've never gone through clinical. They've asked for it, the FDA, going back decades and decades and decades ago, and they never did it. It was always classified as a class 2 device, saying that there's no safe or effectiveness for the device. It's not safe or effective. There's no research on it. And literally decade after decade, they push and push. And finally, the FDA, and I went to the FDA several times when they'd keep coming it up,
Are they
asking.
aware? Are they aware of the consequences of this use?
Absolutely. There's no question. I mean, the research I've submitted and other people have submitted to the FDA, these advisors or the committee, they're aware that these things are not safe. They're not effective. There's never been a clinical trial, done with them. And yet they recategorize these now as there's some safety and effectiveness, which there isn't. Again, they've never done a clinical trial on it, and yet they redid it. And it was simply from the pressure of these manufacturers. And my guess would be, they're paying these people off in some way, shape, form, or fashion. There's great pressure to change the classification and to keep on doing this.
Yeah. If you meant to see President Trump or the any member of the administration of all these organization that is related to his movement, what was the change that you ask for in your field, in this what we are talking about during this episode?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that RFK and President Trump have been doing, and they've been doing a wonderful job at it. We're slowly getting there, and I think more needs to happen. So for one, all clinical trials need to be on a database that the public can access, that we can all access. So one, full transparency, all clinical trial data, not just the ones that they get to submit, but we want to see it all. Two, we want to be having more regulations on the conflicts of interest. If you're getting paid $300,000 by a drug company, and then you're also getting paid 150 grand by the FDA, where's your alliance and allegiance? So I think those conflicts need to be completely, one, disclosed, and get rid of the policy where you shouldn't disclose it because it might look bad, which literally was the policy that they had. That needs to go away. And so really, I think if you have a conflict, you need to be removed.
Yeah.
I think the regulatory bodies, the committees, they need to have more diversity. You need to have not just these certain doctors in a certain field, but you really got to have more diversity on these panels. You got to have people from the outside who's not, part of a university funded by a drug company, not somebody that's paid by a drug company, not somebody who's already had a prestigious, career in the industry and now they're retired.
Pure neutrality. Yeah.
Yeah.
Neutral.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other steps that they are taking and can take. Again, even like with the clinical design, clinical trials are very short. Again, a few weeks, let's say 16 weeks max. But people are put on these drugs for years and they tell you, oh, you're going to be on it for life. Well, there's no data to support that recommendation, but yet they do it. So our clinical trial data should be much longer and we should require it. And for medications that have a high risk, like antidepressants, SSRIs, where it literally now has a black box warning label on it, and I helped get those put on there by
that Oxycontin is still in the market.
Yeah. The antidepressants and the SSRIs are on the market. I mean, they've been proven, at least in the research world. All of us doctors know that it's really a placebo effect. But they're out there, and it does work. It's just not working for the reason they think it does. But they do increase suicide. This we know. We know for a fact that if you take this, again, take 1,000 depressed people, divide them into two categories, level out the depression, put them on Prozac or Paxil or one of the most widely used antidepressants, the SSRIs, and give this group an active placebo. You will see suicides, in this group. But guess what? You're going to see a lot more suicides in this group. And the suicides are going to be because of the medication. There's a causality element, and the FDA acknowledges that. And so when we know there's a certain drug that is very dangerous like that can cause aggression or even like a homicide and a violent act and or suicide, when you have that, maybe we should have even a higher rigid level for the clinical trial, meaning that the triple blind versus a double blind, maybe a longer clinical trial, maybe making sure that, you're accounting for people that drop out, you're not using like statistics and to lie with manipulation. You got to have a much more robust and sound study. And unfortunately, lying with statistics is a really good way just to make the outcome whatever you want.
Yeah. And solving this issue has to be a priority. I'm going to thank you so much, Toby, but I'm going to ask you last question. You were an executive producer for The Man You Don't Know with Chris Martini. I had Chris once in my show. So is there any new documentary about President Trump coming soon, working with his family?
So I can't go into too many details. Wink, wink, hint, hint. But yeah, I'm working with Global Ascended Studios and Christopher Martini, the director, and Josh Mastriano, who, is the president and kind of really spearheaded a lot of this. And I'm happy to continue working with them and others, like, looking forward to maybe doing some work with Turning Point and Charlie Kirk and doing more of these documentaries. And in fact, a whole streaming platform. So in the coming months and stuff, I think you'll start to see, I Identify is another streaming platform that's out there. They're looking to do some really good content. And I think you're going to see, a lot of these network, how to say this? I think you're going to see a lot of these people who are really influential players come together to put out some really great quality content. And I'm excited to be part of that and do more of it.
Yeah, we're looking forward. Thank you, Toby, Dr. Toby. It was a great interview. Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. Anytime.